I'm a bit tardy to the party on this one here, but yesterday, April Fool's Day, we got the announcement for the upcoming rule set as far as Scarlet and Violet goes, and that is going to be the format known as Regulation G. So Regulation G here is going to be going live from May 1st, and it's going to last until August 31st. And basically the main rule set here is, in addition to 5 of your standard Pokemon, you are now allowed to have access to 1 restricted legendary Pokemon, which is typically the Pokemon you see on the box art of the games. So basically we're going to be seeing Mewtwo, Kyogre, Groudon, Calyrex Ice Rider, Calyrex Shadow Rider, Koraidon, Miraidon, stuff like that, which we're going to touch on in Showdown in just a few minutes there, because I thought it would be good to go over the list in a general broad sense of terms, talk about some items, talk about some Pokemon that we might see come up in addition to the access of having the restricted Pokemon. And the interesting thing that is going to be fun to watch is how the meta is going to develop in the early format between now as opposed to the end of the summer, because there's at least 4 regional events going live in May. 5 maybe. I'm pretty sure the Puerto Rico special event is May 11th, but that said, I didn't see it on Arcanine Labs. But so basically the 4 events that they have currently listed on Arcanine Labs is Indianapolis, which that one's going to be a little bit brutal for some people because the format is going to go live May 1st, and then the tournament starts May 3rd. So yeah, Indianapolis, I'm very curious to see how people are going to adapt to Regulation G. And then there's Stockholm, Sweden here on the 11th to the 12th. There's going to be Santiago, Chile from May 18th and 19th. And then there's going to be Los Angeles on the 24th to the 26th. And like I said, I'm pretty sure the Puerto Rico event is the same weekend as Stockholm from the 11th to the 12th. So kind of curious to see how that all works out. But anyways, let's jump on into Showdown and talk about some of these restricted Pokemon and what we could potentially expect to see as the meta develops in its early stages. So here we are in the Pokemon Showdown, and the list of restricted legendary Pokemon has grown so large that you actually can't fit them all into a singular box on Showdown, which that's wild to me. And that's also factoring in the fact that Xerneas, Yveltal, and Zygarde are not allowed because they're not in the game. So just look at all of our options. We have the better part of 30 restricted Pokemon to choose from, which means there is a lot of diversity to sift through. So we're going to jump on into the first list here in the first box and go in generational order with Mewtwo. So Mewtwo here has a whopping base 154 special attack stat, which most Pokemon would beg for. And without any investment here and just maximum IVs in a neutral nature, you hit 174 points, which is incredibly powerful right out of the gate before you even start to look into any form of investment or nature. And on top of that too, Mewtwo also has a base 130 speed stat, which means right out of the gate we have a base 150 total without any investment. So you could easily run a choice specs or a choice scarf on this thing. You could run a life orb, and then that way too you do have the option of going for protect while still getting a bit of a damage modifier. Now Mewtwo does not see the most competitive success, but that doesn't stop people from trying it out. Honestly, I'm probably going to try it out at some point myself. A little bit of a Gen 1er here, but anyways, the nice thing about Mewtwo is its signature move of Psystrike is a stronger version of Psyshock. It's base 100 power, and it does damage based off the target's defense stat instead of the special defense stat. So if your opponent thinks they're being clever and going for a specially defensive Pokemon in front of Mewtwo, well, if you have that option of going for the Psystrike, if you're running a Life Orb, great, you have some flexibility between your moves. If you're running a Choice Specs or a Choice Scarf, well, then it's the question of, are they going to lock into this? Is this going to hurt? Do I need to switch to a physical wall instead? And Mewtwo's options as far as coverage are so vast that you could easily choose just about any type of Terra to run on it to benefit from having the stab from it. Or if you wanted to go on the more defensive option with your Terra, you could look into going for Terra Dark or Terra Fairy specifically, and then that way you now have a resistance to Sucker Punch, which would be a main way of trying to get around Mewtwo. Sucker Punch and Light Screen could be really bad for Mewtwo, so having that means of being able to switch your type into something that resists Sucker Punch, or just having a Pokemon with Psychic Terrain or Farigiraf with its Armor Tail ability, that would be really great support for Mewtwo. And if you wanted to with a choice item set, you could run the option of both Side Strike and Expanding Force, and then that way you have a stab option that hits on the physical defensive side, or a option of hitting on the specially defensive side, and then that way too you can keep your opponents guessing what Mewtwo is going to lock into. And if you're running a choice item set, then you still have 2 more move slots to run coverage options. So that's basically Mewtwo in a nutshell right there. Alright, so moving on to Generation 2, we have Lugia and Ho-Oh as our restricted legendaries from Johto. So Lugia is really defensive here. It's got a base 106 HP stat alongside a base 130 physical defense and a 154 special defense. And to top it all off, it also has a base 110 speed stat, which is fairly respectable. Lugia's biggest drawback though is its offensives. It's only got base 90 in both its physical attack and its special attack, but that doesn't really slow it down at the end of the day, because you could always use the combination of Lugia's multi-skill ability, which reduces the amount of damage that it takes from the first attack that it deals with on the field while its HP is full. And plus on top of that, if Lugia gets its HP back up to full, well, it's got its multi-skill back. So Lugia has the potential to be tanky and wall things for days, especially on the specially defensive side, because it does have that Calm Mind. It has access to Recover, and then its signature move of Aeroblast is a nice base 100 flying type attack that is a special attack, and it does have a boosted crit ratio, so that could be relatively nice at the end of the day. You start recovering up some HP onto Lugia, and plus you do have that whopping base 154 special defense stat working in your favor. And Ho-Oh also has that exact same base 154 special defense stat working in its favor, which is really nice because Ho-Oh does actually have some offensive presence compared to Lugia with its base 130 attack stat, and its base 110 special attack stat is not terrible either. If you wanted to, you could run an Assault Vest on Ho-Oh, and then that way your special defense is just going really far and being extrapolated with that 50% boost from the Assault Vest. Now that does lock you into only using damaging moves, but Ho-Oh's hidden ability of Regenerator restores 1/3 of its HP when it switches out, which could be relatively nice, because if you start setting up Ho-Oh, then it kind of gets a little counterproductive with Regenerator switching it out and then resetting its stats. But if you have that Assault Vest, well, right out of the gate you do have that special defense boost right there, so you could just focus on trying to do as much damage as possible. Now with Ho-Oh 2, you could make the case for, say, a Life Orb or a Choice Band. If you run a Life Orb, that does give you the option of running some status moves in addition to your offensive moves as well. And if you run a Choice Band, well, similar to the Assault Vest, you're locked into only using damaging moves, because there's no point in locking into a status move with the Choice Band, but you do get that initial burst of damage right out of the gate with the Choice Band. Ho-Oh is the original Sacred Fire user, which is nice because it's a base 100 physical fire type option that has a 50% chance to burn the target. So unless they have the Covert Cloak or they Terra into a fire type, you're likely burning a physical attacker with this thing, which is nice. And then Stab Brave Bird is never a bad thing to have, especially since you can always Regenerator out and get the HP back from the recoil damage. So that's what I was thinking about Gen 2 as far as their restricted mons go in a nutshell. Let's jump on into Groudon, Kyogre, and Rayquaza. Alright, so moving on to Hoenn, we have Groudon with an incredibly high physical attack stat of base 150 and the main ability of setting the sun with its Drought. And then we have Kyogre here with the ability to set rain with Drizzle while also having a base 150 special attack. And then Rayquaza, who has the ability to say no to weather and negate the effects of weather with Airlock. And then also having a base 150 in both physical and special attack. All three of Hoenn's restricted mons are going to be incredibly powerful, but unfortunately for Rayquaza, we're going to be seeing more Groudon and Kyogre. Historically speaking, Groudon and Kyogre have always had tremendous competitive success, and Rayquaza has been a little bit of a niche outside of the Orash generation, having access to its Mega. And yes, I apologize if I switch between Rayquaza and Rayquaza. It is hard to fight the childhood impulses in me right there. But anyways, as far as Rayquaza goes, we can go with either a physical or mixed set. If you want to go physical, you do have access to Dragon Ascent, which is a flying type close combat. If you want to go special, well, you do still have access to Draco Meteor, which is a hard hitting dragon type option. And if you wanted to still keep going on with the physical set, you could go Terra Normal, run Extreme Speed, put this thing next to a Chen Pao. Not quite as efficient as, say, the likes of Entei or Dragonite because they have Inner Focus, but you could technically take advantage of Chen Pao's Sword of Ruin and run the Extreme Speed on the Rayquaza if you wanted to. And I just had Dragon Claw here as a physical dragon option as well. So you could even, technically speaking, throw a Scarf on this thing and then just run all four of these moves. Well, the Extreme Speed would be a little bit counterproductive, but you guys get the idea. Let's get back to the main point. Groudon and Kyogre. So Groudon here is going to be very strong this generation because it sets the sun. All of the Scarlet Paradox mons are going to benefit from this thing being able to provide them to sun and turn on their photosynthesis. I could honestly see Fluttermane and Raging Bolt as well as Walking Wake all benefiting from Groudon being next to them, with them either getting a speed or special attack boost from their photosynthesis and then allowing them to run an item that isn't the booster energy. So that could be really nice. The fact that the Clear Amulet is a thing too means Groudon doesn't have to worry about Intimidate from the likes of Incineroar, which means if you're running into a Clear Amulet Groudon, you're definitely going to want to have Knockoff on your team when you build around it. And then Terra Fire is going to be incredibly nice for Groudon because now you don't have to worry about this thing getting burned. You could technically run an Assault Vest on this thing, patch up its special defense since it does have a 90 right there, which is fairly respectable once you factor in an Assault Vest, so you could do that. And as far as move options go, well, Groudon's signature Precipice Blades is a base 120 ground type spread option right there. You have Rock Slide to deal with flying types. You have Heat Crash to benefit from the sun, as well as the fact that Groudon is a hefty lad, which means it's going to be doing more damage to a lot of things since Heat Crash does do more damage based off the user's weight. So that could be nice, especially if you want to give it stab with the Terra Fire. Sword Stance is always a respectable move with Groudon, but another thing you could run next to this thing is actually Gouging Fire or Screamtail, and then have them go for Howl next to Groudon, and then you could justify an Assault Vest or Clear Amulet set. If you run the Clear Amulet, you could just drop Sword Stance altogether and just run Protect, so that could be really nice right there. And then as far as Kyogre goes, you set the rain, which naturally synergizes with Thunder and Water Spout. Water Spout is a base 150 water type attack that is going to still do a lot of damage to things, But one nice thing here for a little bit of a counterplay option for Kyogre is actually Raging Bolt. Since you do have access to Thunderclap on that thing, it's an electric type Sucker Punch. You could potentially give Kyogre a little bit of a rude awakening with that Thunderclap. So hypothetically speaking, you could technically make the case for actually running Terra Ground on Kyogre to try to get around that, which could be nice. Origin Pulse is another nice option for benefiting from having rain on the field, since it's a water type move that is going to be powered up by the rain. And because rain benefits Kyogre's stab option of water, you could really run that defensive Terra on this thing, maybe run Terra Ground like I mentioned, or Terra Grass, or even say Terra Poison if you're worried about fairy type attacks, since Flutter Mane is going to still be relatively prevalent. And on the off chance you run into Grimmsnarl or Iron Valiant, since they do have Spirit Break, which be another means of lowering the target's special attack, you could run that Terra Poison. Terra Dark could be nice, and then that way you don't have to worry about the legs of pranksters with Eerie Impulse or Confide, so that could be another option. Or if you're just worried about not having your stats lowered, you could run a Clear Amulet on this thing as well. Archaludon is going to benefit from Kyogre setting the rain. Tornadus is now going to have its Bleak Wind Storms not missing. It doesn't necessarily have to run Rain Dance, or it could run Rain Dance as a backup for Kyogre if your opponent switches in, say, Alolan Ninetales or Groudon, Torkoal, anything that could change the weather right there. So that's basically what I was thinking about the Hoenn trio right there. Let's jump on over to Sinnoh. Alright, so with Sinnoh here, we have 6 restricted Pokemon, and basically it boils down to 3 of them having 2 different forms each, and 2 of these 6 Pokemon are brand new to competitive play, with them being Dialga Origin as well as Palkia Origin, and then we have the standard Dialga, Palkia, Giratina Altered, and Giratina Origin. So let's touch on Dialga first with both itself and its origin form. So base Dialga here has 100 HP, 120 attack, 120 defense, 150 special attack, 100 special defense, and 90 speed. As far as the stat differences go between Dialga and Dialga Origin is 20 of those points go out of the attack stat into the special defense stat. Now, the main argument you could make for running Dialga versus Dialga Origin is, do you want a little bit of extra bulk on your special defense side, or do you want an item? Because you do need to run the Adamant Crystal on Dialga in order to obtain the Origin form. So you could run an item on regular Dialga, or you could have the Adamant Crystal on it to give it the Origin form. And then as far as the rest of your stats go, it's relatively still the same. Typically what we see from Dialga is we see a Trick Room on it, and then in the Sword and Shield era of Dynamax, we would see often a weakness policy, and then they could go for max Steel Spike and max Quake to boost up the defense stats, while also being able to lower the target's attack stat with max Wormwind. But Dynamax is gone, so the weakness policy on Dialga could still technically work, because Dialga does have the bulk, and Bulldoze coming off of a Dusclops, for example, is not going to do a whole lot, especially if you get Trick Room up. And then that way too, you could also have the speed drop work in your favor from the Bulldoze, so Dialga goes slower than a lot of things. But one thing that you're going to have to worry about on that side is Ursaluna Blood Moon, which could make it a little bit riskier to run the weakness policy. Now, Dialga and Ursaluna Blood Moon could be a good pairing right here, because Dialga could run Trick Room in one of its move slots. It also has the telepathy ability as opposed to pressure, so if you wanted to run spread moves that might potentially hit the entire field, you could run telepathy instead. Like, say maybe you have a Landorus Therian and you're not going the Trick Room route, maybe you want to run Earthquake next to this thing and just take no damage, you could run telepathy, and then that way you don't have to burn your Terra to become a flying type, for example, so you could do that. As far as Dialga's Steel Dragon typing goes, it is a phenomenal defensive typing, so regardless of whether you're running this or the Origin form, you have a lot of defenses working in your favor that you could potentially justify running Stellar on this thing, which would give you a boost to all of the different coverage options you have on Dialga. So maybe Stellar and a Choice Spec set might be the way to go for Dialga, or a Life Orb could be relatively nice. This thing does get access to Aura Sphere, which is really handy since Chen Pao does not have the greatest special defense stat, so you could just bop that thing with a 4x super effective fighting type attack if you wanted to, and if they go Terra Ghost to dodge it, well, now you can hit them with, say, a Flash Cannon or an Earth Power. You could do something like that between both Dialga and Dialga Origin. And the nice thing about the Adamant Crystal is it does give Dialga's 2 stab options a 20% boost in power. So if you wanted to stack that with Stellar, or even just say Terra Dragon or Terra Steel, that could work out to be nice. Or if you wanted to go on the defensive option, having Terra Fairy or Terra Poison would give you a fighting resistance, and it would also drop your neutral type dynamic to Fairy if you go Terra Poison, so you wouldn't have to worry about the Flutter Mane as much. So that could be a nice thing as far as Dialga goes. Now let's jump on into Palkia and its Origin counterpart. So Palkia's normal stats here is 90 HP, 120 attack, 100 defense, 150 special attack, 120 special defense, and 100 speed. Now, the main difference here is those 20 points in your attack actually drop into your speed instead of your physical defense. So Origin Palkia could potentially get the better of a lot of opponents with the speed boost that it gets from its stat redistribution, and then with a Tailwind working in its favor, Origin Palkia could potentially stomp a lot of things. But regardless, Palkia's typing is Water Dragon, which is also another great defensive typing, and honestly, Palkia could be a really good countermeasure to Kyogre, since it would benefit from Thunder not being able to miss in the rain. So if you want to run Palkia, you could do that too. And on top of that, if you want to run Terra Fairy on this thing, you might be able to have some counter play against Miraidon, because Miraidon is going to be incredibly good as well, and it's going to be a little while before we talked about that thing since it's at the very end of the list. But having a nice Earth Power here to just bot Miraidon with could be very handy, especially if they go Terra Electric and drop their Dragon weakness to Spatial Rend. So you could do that, or if you wanted to, you could run, say, maybe the Scope Lens on Palkia, go for a Dragon Shear next to this thing, and then turn Spatial Rend into a guaranteed critical hit. That could be nice too, because Spatial Rend is a great alternative to Draco Meteor for Palkia, since it doesn't have to worry about the special attack drop at the end of the day. So you could do that with Palkia, which could be really handy, and that would be the nice thing for running base Palkia versus Origin, because Origin would need the Lustrous Globe. Now, the Lustrous Globe will give you a 20% boost to both Water and Dragon type attacks, which both of those typings together hit a lot of things really hard. Now, if you run into, say, a Storm Drain Pokemon that is terrestrialized into a Fairy type, you're a little up the wall, but I digress. You could still make the case for, say, running Spatial Rend on this thing, maybe Thunder, and then maybe Hydro Pump, and then that way too, 3 heavy hitting moves. That could be a really good Kyogre countermeasure as well for Origin, since Origin is fairly faster than regular Palkia, so you could get the jump on Kyogres. The Miraidon dynamic might be a little bit harder, but it's food for thought. Now let's talk about Giratina Altered and Giratina Origin. This thing basically inverts its attack and special attack with its defense and special defense. So Altered form has a whopping base 150, 100 in both of its attacks, and then 120 in both of its defenses, while Origin has 120 in both of its attacks. Now you do have to run the Grisius Core, and potentially this is where it gets a little weird too, since they changed the items. Potentially the Gristy's Orb as well. On this should, in theory, maybe work, but if not, go with the core. But anyways, the main idea here about Giratina is you can go for a bulk and then run maybe a more defensive set. With the altered set, you could run Will-O-Wisp to burn physical attackers and then go for a Hex. Or you could pair this with a Prankster Bond that has access to Thunderwave. You could do something like that. You could also maybe have a Dragon Tail to force your opponents out and phase them away. So if they start setting up, you could do that. I'm fairly certain you get access to Defog as well. You do get access to Defog. Defog is a great option here because it clears the terrain and hazards on the field. So if your opponent has grassy terrain from Rillaboom or electric terrain from Miraidon, you could remove that terrain right there, which would be very beneficial for Giratina. And on the off chance that they set Misty Terrain, well, you could remove the Misty Terrain with Defog and then go for the Will-O-Wisp, and then that way you're burning things. Now, you could potentially do something like that with Altered Giratina, but Giratina is like Mewtwo. You don't see a lot of competitive success with it, so we're not going to linger on it for much longer. And let's just look at the origin form. You do have the 140 into your attack and special attack with no investment in just maximum IVs. And if you don't have max IVs in your minimum, well, you're at 125. That's factoring with a neutral nature. So what you could potentially do with Giratina is you could go for Shadow Force, its signature move, which does protect in one turn, and it does break protect, so that could be really nice and to say the likes of a Fluttermane, especially if you wanted to play around with your Terra options. If you're a little bit worried about dark types, you could always go for Terra Dark yourself, or Terra Fairy, or even Terra Poison if you're worried about fairies. So Giratina does have some options at its disposal. If you want to run a physical set, you could run Terra Fire as well, and then you could just deal with it from there. Draco Meteor is definitely not a bad option here for Giratina. You could just hit it for incredibly hard damage. The Gristy's Core is going to boost up the power of Ghost and Dragon type attacks by 20%, so both options between physical and special on Giratina could be relatively nice, and since it is a base 90 speed Pokemon here, you could make the case for running, say, either a quiet nature or a brave nature, and that would give your respective attack a boost up to 154 at the end of the day. So that's the 6 Sinnoh restricteds. Let's move on to Unova. So the Unova region here is giving us 5 restricted Pokemon in the forms of Zekrom, Reshiram, Kyurem base, and then its fusion counterparts of Kyurem Black and Kyurem White. And unfortunately for the base Kyurem, despite it having base 130 in both of its attack stats and 95 speed, it's basically a weaker Rayquaza. Unfortunately for it, we're probably not going to be using base Kyurem at any point in time. Its signature move of Glaciatate is basically just a slightly stronger Icy Wind, but you could be funny with Scale Shot at least and take the 1 defense drop and have a speed boost with it while having the loaded dice guarantee you at least hit it 4 times. So you could do something like that, but I really don't recommend doing it. Ice Dragon is not the best defensive typing. Now, it is a nice offensive typing, but unfortunately for Kyurem, you're going to be looking at probably Kyurem Black or Kyurem White, and you're going to be optimizing whether or not you choose to go the physical route with Kyurem Black or the special route with Kyurem White. But let's jump on into Zekrom first here. So Zekrom here is an electric dragon typing here, which it shares the same typing as Miraidon as well as Raging Bolt, but unlike both of those two Pokemon, it is a physical attacker with a base 150 attack, which is just incredibly nice to have at its disposal. We could run a clear amulet on this thing, and then that way it can get around Intimidate, which is a main means of keeping this thing typically in check. As far as electric stab options here, Zekrom actually has 2 signature moves here in the form of Fusion Bolt, which is a base 100 power and 100 accuracy move. It technically doubles in power if Fusion Flare is used before it, but unfortunately we're probably not going to be seeing that in Reg G since we're only allowed the 1 restricted legendary. But in a potential future format, we might be able to make use of that. But it still is nice and reliable accuracy-wise, so not the worst thing to keep in your back pocket as well. And then we have Bolt Strike right here, which really Wild Charge should have been this year. It's base 130 raw electric physical power with a 85 accuracy. And it also has 20% chance to paralyze the target, which could be nice here. Zekrom could just charge headfirst into something with that Bolt Strike, and that is a wonderful move to have as well. As far as dragon options here goes, we do get access to Dragon Claw as a dragon type stab option, but Zekrom doesn't really have the most in terms of dragon options, but it isn't the worst move to have, and it does get access to Dragon Dance, so you could run a Dragon Dance set on Zekrom here, boost up your attack, boost up your speed, and then you can just go for a raw damage. And honestly, this might be more my playstyle than anything. I would rather run the Fusion Bolt than the Bolt Strike if I'm going for that Dragon Dance, and then that way I'm not too worried about my attacks missing. So you could do something like that. Zekrom does get a lot of good special coverage as well, and it's base 120 special attacks, not terrible. It does get access to Thunder, so you could use this as some good counterplay to Kyogre as well, which could be relatively nice at the end of the day, just being able to drop a Thunder on things. And plus you could always run Tailwind, Rain Dance, Tornadus right next to it as well, so you could just drop those raw Thunders with Zekrom as well. And plus you have access to Flash Cannon, Earth Power, and Draco Meteor as some relatively strong special options as well. And a nice thing here as well for Zekrom is it does get access to Haze. Haze does remove the stat changes for everything on the field, so while it'd be not the greatest to run on a Dragon Dance set, if you want to run Haze as a slot filler for Zekrom, you do have a means of removing stat boosts as well. So if you're up against a Groudon that has Sword Stance, and you get that speed working in your favor, you could haze away the Sword Stance boosts, at least in the bare minimum. Or if you've taken Intimidate drops, you could always go for the Haze that way. So Haze is just a nice thing to keep in your back pocket here for Zekrom. Now, as far as Reshiram goes, Reshiram is the special attacking counterpart typically to Zekrom here. It's also Dragonfire, which is a great coverage typing here. It shares this typing here with Gouging Fire, and it is a nice special alternative to it. So, like Zekrom, we do have two signature attacks that are fire type. We have Fusion Flare, which is basically the special variant of Fusion Bolt, 100 power, 100 accuracy. And then we have Blue Flare, which is, again, Bolt Strike's counterpart, 130 raw damage and 85 accuracy with a 20% chance to burn the target, which is relatively nice. Since Groudon is going to be around as well as Koraidon, we do get the benefit of the sun typically showing up on the field, so Reshiram could be a little bit of some good counterplay that way by receiving the boost from the sun with Fusion Flare and Blue Flare just to do some raw damage. You can slap Draco Meteor on this thing, and a nice thing here too with both Reshiram and Zekrom is their abilities. So Reshiram's ability of Turbo Blaze and Zekrom's ability of Terravolt are basically just signature variants of Mold Breaker, so you can bypass the abilities of the opponent's Pokemon as well and hit them for moves that wouldn't otherwise work. So technically speaking, you could hit through Golden Goes Good as Gold with a status move with these two things as well. So that could be nice because Reshiram does get access to Noble Roar, which does lower the target's attack and special attack one stage, and I'm pretty sure Zekrom also gets it. It does. So you could use Noble Roar off of both of these Pokemon, which could be relatively supportive options as well. Now let's jump on into the fusion forms of Kyurem. So Kyurem Black has a base 170 attack stat, while Kyurem White has that base 170 special attack stat, and they also have base 100 in their respective defenses. For Kyurem Black, we have the physical defense, and for Kyurem White, we have the special defense, and this could be huge. You can run a Choice Scarf or a Choice Specs on Kyurem White. You have a great option in the form of Blizzard, especially since Hail was reworked into Snow. You get that 50% defense boost for ice types. You could run, say, Blizzard with Specs. Having access to Fusion Flare is going to be nice because ice and fire coverage combined with dragon just hits a lot of things on the field. So you could run Draco Meteor, you could run Dragon Pulse. If you're running choice specs, you could run both if you wanted to, but I think really having these three moves right here cover a lot of your bases. You could go Terra Ice to get double stab on Blizzard, Terra Dragon to get double stab on Draco Meteor. Terra Fire would give you stab on Fusion Flare while also resisting fairies. So Kyurem White could be incredibly scary, and then you could always just put your fourth move in here for whatever you want for coverage. You could run Earth Power, for example. Stuff like that would work. Freeze Dry would be another solid option since you'd be able to hit water types for super effective damage with that. So we'll just put Freeze Dry in there. And then as far as Kyurem Black goes, well, we could run either the Clear Amulet, like I mentioned with Zekrom. This would give you a means of getting around the Intimidate drops, but Loaded Dice could be really good because you get access to Icicle Spear, so that's a great ice type option. I mean, look at Baxcalibur right there. You can run basically a pseudo Baxcalibur idea on Kyurem Black, which just has more physical power with that base 170 attack right there. You can potentially run a Jolly Nature on here, focus on getting more speed with the Kyurem Black, with the Scale Shot, and then Icicle Spear can finish things off. And plus you still have access to the Fusion Bolt, so you don't have to worry about water types just walling your Icicle Spears. You could just spank them right there with that Fusion Bolt and just do some raw damage. And plus you could always go for the Protect, and then that way you have a means of keeping yourself safe. And if you don't want to run the Loaded Dice and you don't want to run the Clear Amulet, a Covert Cloak could be relatively nice as well. And then that way you don't have to worry about Fake Out. So you could potentially do something like that. And if you did want to change your moves around, you could run, say, maybe a Dragon Dance, and then that way you get an attack and speed boost. And now you don't have to worry about your defense being lowered. But having that base 120 with the defense boost from Snow, that could be really nice as well. So that's my main thoughts on the Unova 5 right there. Let's jump on into Gen 7. We're skipping Gen 6 because they just decided that Xerneas needs a break from winning World Championships. But anyways, Gen 7, here we go. So the Alola region technically gave us 7 restricted Pokemon, but I did include 2 of them on here because it's Cosmog and Cosmoem alongside Lunala, Solgaleo, and then Necrozma in its 2 fusions. But let's be real here. The real reason why I don't want to bring attention to Cosmog is it's all fun and games until Nebby here shows up,
slaps an assault vest on itself so it doesn't use Splash, and just struggles everyone to death.
It's all fun and games. So anyways, let's talk about Lunala first here. Lunala is a bulky ghost psychic type, and the fact that it has terrestrialization means it can get around its 4 times weakness to both dark and ghost, which is going to be incredibly handy. Its Shadow Shield ability reduces the amount of damage it takes from attacks when its HP is full, so Lunala has some interesting dynamics going in its favor. Its signature move, Moongeist Beam, ignores the abilities of other Pokemon. It's a solid base 100 ghost type attack, and it also has the nice reliable accuracy of 100. So you could run Moongeist Beam, you could technically run Meteor Beam, which this was big in Sword and Shield since you could run a Power Herb on Lunala, get that special attack boost, and then just rely on your other options. And really, if you wanted to with Lunala, you could still run that Meteor Beam, Power Herb, get that special attack, and then run, say, Moonblast and Moongeist Beam. Fairy Ghost is really strong coverage. You could go Terra Fairy on this thing, and then that way too, while you would be now removing your immunity to fighting, you do still have a nice resistance to it. You also have the nice option of having stab Moonblasts, and if you wanted to keep Terra Ghost, you could do that for the double stab on Moongeist Beam, but you would have to be very, very careful of opposing Fluttermanes. So just some food for thought right there. Lunala could also go for Calm Minds if it really wanted to get a nice special attack and special defense boost, but it also gets Expanding Force as well. So if you have Psychic Terrain on the field, especially if you fired off that Moongeist Beam, or rather, sorry, the Meteor Beam, and then go for the Expanding Force, Lunala could do some major damage. And the nice thing here too is it does share the same typing as Calyrex Shadow Rider, but it's considerably slower than Calyrex Shadow Rider, so you could run the Trick Room option instead. So that could be a nice alternative to the Shadow Rider. It's got that base 137 HP stat, which is really nice, and 137 special attack is nothing to scoff at either, and the 107 special defense is really handy. And honestly, the only thing that's kind of bad on this thing is that 113 physical attack. Really, like, this thing wants to be more of a special attacker. The 97 speed is nice, and the 89 defense, hypothetically speaking, that is how you would get around this thing, is with physical attacks. Throw up a light screen so that the special attacks don't do quite as much damage. That would be one way of dealing with Lunala there. As far as Solgaleo goes, it's a steel psychic type with 137 attack, 107 defense, and 137 HP. Its signature ability of Full Metal Body is basically Clear Body. It prevents its stats from being lowered, and honestly, you could have a lot of fun with this thing. You could run a weakness policy on it, and then you could pair, like, say, a Raikou with Bulldoze on it. Go for the nice speedy Bulldoze off of the Raikou. You activate the weakness policy, and now Solgaleo is not going to take that speed drop thanks to Full Metal Body, and then it can just do some major damage. Its signature move, Sunsteel Strike, it just hits things incredibly hard with that base 100 steel type coverage option. It also ignores the abilities of opposing Pokemon. You get access to Flare Blitz, which is great fire coverage right there. I'm pretty sure this thing gets Psychic Fangs. It does, so you can destroy screens, so you don't have to worry about Reflect or Light Screen, which is going to be relatively handy. And then on top of that, you do get access to Rock Slide, so there's a great means of punishing flying types with that as well. And you even get access to Rock Tomb, which is a little bit of speed control. So Gallo can be incredibly hard hitting as well. And then moving on to base form Necrozma, we have 127 special attack. You could potentially run a Calm Mind or Bulk Up. Or, I lied. You don't get Bulk Up. You could run a Calm Mindset with this thing. Increase your special attack and special defense. Your Prism Armor here is going to be reducing the amount of damage you take from super effective hits by a quarter, so that could be relatively nice. And then you do have Necrozma's signature move of Photon Geyser, so depending on if your attack stat or your special attack is higher, you're going to be doing damage that way. So that could be really nice, especially if you have the Calm Mind boost working in your favor. I'm pretty sure this thing gets Expanding Force too. It does. So you could do a lot of heavy damage with psychic type attacks with this thing, and the whole reason why I'm mentioning this now is because we got a little thing called Necrozma Dawn Wings right here, which can do essentially the same thing. It's basically all the great qualities of Lunala minus the Shadow Shield fused with Necrozma here. We have the Prism Armor, so it's going to be taking less super effective damage, and because it does share the same typing as Lunala, you can change that around with Terrestrialization, and then you can really pick what you want to have attack-wise reduced in power thanks to that Prism Armor, and having that base 157 special attack coupled with the 109 defense and 127 special defense is going to be huge. You still get access to Moongeist Beam and Moonblast. No, you don't. I lied. You do get Photon Geyser, though, which is really nice. So you do have that Moongeist Beam and the Photon Geyser, both of which have stab on the Necrozma right here. You could choose to go for a coverage option, like, say, maybe Meteor Beam, and plus Meteor Beam would give you that special attack boost, so that works out relatively nice. And this is slower than Lunala, so you could get more justification on Trick Room on it than you would the original Shadow Bat, so You do have that working in your favor. And then, like I mentioned about Solgaleo with the weakness policy, you could do that with Necrozma Duskmane, which that base 157 attack doubling would be really nice. But you might want to use Shadow Sneak instead of Bulldoze because you no longer have full metal body, so you would also be taking a speed drop. But I mean, if you want to run the Trick Room, you could do that too. You still get access to Sunsteel Strike, and because of Photon Geyser's mechanic, you do get that nice special physical split right there. So it's like Terra Blast essentially. So it's a nice stab option for Necrozma. And then you could still run the Rock Slide, which is going to be really good. So you have some nice strong coverage between Steel, Psychic, and Rock. And then you could run the Protect or Trick Room on the Duskmane. So overall, I think this could be really strong for Necrozma. Now, we're finally gearing up towards the end of the list here. We have Galar and Paldea, so let's jump on into those. Alright, so Generation 8 here actually brings us to the end of the first box of Restricted Legendaries. We have Zan Crown and Zenta on this screen here, and then on the next one we have the options of Eternatus, Calyrex Ice Rider, and Calyrex Shadow Rider to talk about. So let's talk about the two mascot Pokemon of Sword and Shield. So Zacian here is a Steel Fairy type in its crowned form, and it did get nerfed this generation here. It did lose a little bit of attack, and its Intrepid Sword did lose the effect of always raising its attack upon switch in, but it still gives you a free boost to your attack the first time you do switch in. And honestly, Zacian, while it didn't have access to Dynamax, does have access to Terrestrialization, so we don't have to necessarily worry about burns if we wanted to go Terra Fire with this thing. If we wanted to double our stab on Fairy or Steel type attacks, we could go Terra Steel or Terra Fairy. Behemoth Blade still is going to hit like a truck with that base 100 Steel type of power. It doesn't have the Dynamax around to double in power naturally, but Terra Steel will still give you the same results of power. And honestly, you could run Sacred Sword to get around defensive Pokemon that want to increase their physical defense and start going for body press. Looking at you, Registeel, you too, Goodra, you guys are going to have to start running Terra Ghost if you don't already do so. And even Zenta, you can bypass the boost from Dauntless Shield with Sacred Sword as well. And Play Rough is just a nice fairy type option that you could do. You could run these three moves and then use a little bit of speed control in the form of Prankster Thunderwave or Prankster Scary Face or Tailwind to speed up Zacian if you wanted to. Or what you could do too, if you're worried about Intimidate, is you pair Gouging Fire next to Zacian, and then you just go for Howl. And then that way, Gouging Fire and Zacian are both getting attack boosts from the Howl, and Zacian just is so naturally fast, it's going to do a lot of damage. And honestly, you could look into building your EVs so that you're slightly slower than a boosted speed Photosynthesis Gouging Fire, so that the attack boost goes before Zacian does. So you could actually look into more bulk on Zacian as opposed to just raw attack and speed. So that could be something relatively nice for Zacian. Now let's talk about Zamazenta, because they finally gave this big body press, which means Zamazenta now has a fighting type stab option that is not named Close Combat, which means we don't actually have to worry about lowering our physical defense or our special defense with Close Combat's drawback. We can slap Iron Defense on here, and with the Dauntless Shield, we can very quickly hit +3 into our defense. We don't have to worry about our defense stat being lowered overall, because there's no ability like Intimidate that just lowers the opponent's defense upon switch-in, so that's going to be relatively nice. We do have to worry about Sword of Ruin off at Chen Pao, but you go for that Iron Defense into the Zamazenta, you get that +2. If you have your Dauntless Shield boost, great, you're now at +3. Body Press is going to start smacking things left, right, and center, and you could always go for the Behemoth Bash for some Steel type coverage if you do run into a Ghost type. Zamazenta was the original Howl support next to Pokemon in Generation 8, so you could technically run Howl on Zamazenta if you wanted to, or like I said with Zacian, you could run the Gouging Fire with Howl next to it, and then that way Zamazenta is also getting an attack boost so that its Behemoth Bash will start doing some damage. And honestly, you could also run Wide Guard on Zenta, and then that way you don't have to worry about Precipice Blades off Groudon, Origin Pulse, or Water Spout from Kyogre, or any other spread moves like that. So let's jump on over to the other half of the list here and get into box number 2 and talk about Eternatus, Galar's third restricted Pokemon. This thing is a Poison Dragon typing. Now, it does have a nice 145 base special attack stat and base 130 speed. It's kind of like Mewtwo in that sense, but one thing that is kind of unfortunate for Eternatus is it only has pressure as its ability, so you can't really add to the dynamic that much, unfortunately. But Poison Dragon's not too bad, because you do have access to a nice form of Sludge Bomb, or rather Stab with Sludge Bomb or Sludge Wave. If you get poison into the opponents, great. You can start whittling them down over time, because this thing does get access to Recover, and it also gets access to Cosmic Power. So if you wanted to, you can increase those 95 defenses with the Cosmic Power, recover it off, and then go for a coverage move here. You could go for Dynamax Cannon, which is its signature move, but since it is a dragon type attack, Steel Fairy's Legzation, they're going to be outright immune to it. So what you could do is you could run the Flamethrower or the Fire Blast if you wanted to. You could power this thing up with a Meteor Beam Power Herb combination. That could be something you do as well. Eternatus is not really my strong suit, so I'm a little bit struggling on this one here, but that was kind of what I was thinking, at least at initial glance. We'll talk about it later more in depth when I've had some time to look at it, but that's kind of what I was thinking here. And then we do have Galar's last 2 restricted forms. From the Crown Tundra DLC, we have Calyrex Ice Rider and Calyrex Shadow Rider. Now, both of these Pokemon technically have 2 abilities because of how As One works. So Ice Rider here combines the Unnerve ability with Glastrier's Chilling Neigh. So every time it picks up a KO, it does get an attack boost while also preventing the opponents from having berries. And then Calyrex Shadow Rider has Spectrier's Grim Neigh and Unnerve combined, so it gets a special attack boost for each KO it picks up. Now, one thing that I do think as far as Calyrex goes is, to my general understanding, you can only obtain this by playing the Crown Tundra DLC, which means it's going to be a little bit harder to obtain. Both Glastrier and Spectrier are available through Scarlet and Violet's DLC, but not Calyrex. So unless there's an event, we're probably not going to see a whole lot of Calyrex unless people transfer up their Calyrex from the Crown Tundra, which, to be fair, if you played Scarlet and Violet's DLC, you probably played Sword and Shields, so we might still see Calyrex that way. But as far as that little tangent goes, let's talk about their stats here. So Ice Rider here is a physical attacker with a base 165 physical attack stat and a 150 defense stat. And the Ice Psychic typing doesn't really matter too much about resistances because of Terrestrialization. I really cannot beat that point into oblivion or put as much stress on that. Because of Terrestrialization, Ice Rider is going to be absolutely terrifying. And also, it has a base 130 special defense stat right there. So this thing is going to be incredibly tanky. This is one of the most prevalent Pokemon that use the weakness policy in the Dynamax format, and Glacial Lance is a spread option with base 120 power. This is absolutely disgusting at the end of the day, especially since Snow, as I mentioned earlier, it does give that 50% boost to the defense stat, so Calyrex has the potential to be extraordinarily bulky, and this is where you're going to want to run Haze for some Pokemon in general, just to undo this thing's attack boosts. So it has options to Glacial Lance, it can run Trick Room, it's extremely slow, so Trick Room could be right there. We could see high horsepower, and then that way it has some ground type stab, and we could basically see a variety of different attacks. We could see Protect, we could see Swords Dance, We could see close combat. We could see crunch. If Calyrex wanted to, it could also run an assault vest and just go for raw damage. Let something else, like say Farigiraf or Cresselia, set up Trick Room for it, and then that way it could just run any of those moves. Close combat, despite lowering defenses, is going to be incredibly scary coming off of this thing, and crunch could be really bad too, since that's some dark type coverage right there to just hit other things relatively hard. It just deals with psychic types. This thing could easily take on the Shadow Rider or Lunala, especially if they don't terrestrialize just with crunch alone, and the speed really would not matter. Now, on the Shadow Rider side, we have base 165 special attack, 150 speed. In a lot of my discussion videos, I have constantly mentioned that base 150 speed and why you want to run a minimum of 112 speed if you want to outspeed things like this under Tailwind. So here we are. So we have Astral Barrage, which is a spread ghost type option. Normal types are going to be incredibly handy for getting around this. So is Light Screen, but once Calyrex starts racking up those special attack boosts, it could go for major damage. They gave it back Expanding Force, so Expanding Force could be a little bit of a problem. And then, depending on what Calyrex wants to run as its item, depends on what it could do for its other two moves. It could technically run a Focus Sash, and then that way it can survive. It could run a Life Orb, which means it could still technically run Protect. And as far as some other options goes, it gets access to Dark Pulse, it gets access to Leaf Storm, Giga Drain, a lot of grass type attacks that could just really cause havoc. And plus, this could be a great means of dealing with Groudon and Kyogre both, because you could also run Psyshock on the Shadow Rider as well. So you could do that. Nope, I don't want Future Sight. You could run the Psyshock, and then that way you do have a means of hitting Kyogre on the physical side with that as well. So we're finally to the end of the list with Generation 9. Let's jump on into Koraidon, Miraidon, and Terapagos here. So we have Koraidon from Scarlet, we have Miraidon from Violet, and then we have Terapagos from the Indigo Disc DLC. So let's start off with Koraidon here. This fig is going to be a nice alternative pick to Groudon. Its ability Orichalcum Pulse not only sets the sun, but it also gives Koraidon a 33% boost to its attack stat, which means that base 135 attack is going to slowly close the difference between itself and Groudon's base 150 attack stat once you factor in that bonus modifier right there. And on top of that, that still leaves Koraidon an item slot to take advantage of. So you could have a Life Orb or a Choice Band if you want to go for some raw damage. This thing does have base 135 speed, so you could easily run a Choice Scarf on it to give it a speed boost as well. And this would make it significantly faster than both Groudon and Kyogre, which is relatively nice at the end of the day. And as far as your stab options go, you're hitting Dragon types super effectively, you're hitting Dark types super effectively, Rock types, Steel types, Normal types, and the Normal typing is going to be very important to hit super effectively, since Terapagos, despite wanting to run the Stellar Terra type, is still going to have the defensive properties of a Normal type when it terrestrializes, so being able to hit that thing is going to be major. So as far as our signature move goes of Collision Course, this is a base 100 fighting type attack that gets a 33% boost in damage when going for super effective damage. So that is going to be very nice hitting normal types such as Terapagos. I really cannot stress that enough. Hitting that for super effective damage and getting that bonus damage there, it's a great alternative to close combat, since we don't have to worry about our defense stats getting lowered one stage each. We have Dragon Claw here for some dragon type stab to hit opposing dragons. And then as far as our coverage goes, we're naturally setting the sun, so having access to a fire type move is not the worst thing in the world. We can use Flare Blitz here, which is just raw base 120 fire type damage, but we could also run, say, Heat Crash or Temper Flare, and then that way we don't have to worry about having the recoil from Flare Blitz. Temper Flare is a base 75 power move, and Heat Crash does depend on the weight of the user, so You would have to know your weight mechanics for Corydon if you want to run the Heat Crash, but that's definitely not the worst thing imaginable. And plus, you also get access to Flame Charge, and while being considerably weaker than that, it is a guaranteed speed boost into Corydon, so you could also make this thing faster with access to the Flame Charge. And then for some non-fire type options, you could go for U-turn to be able to pivot Corydon out. This would be especially handy if you want to run it on a choice scarf set, so you could have that. If you want to run a consumable item like say the white herb, if you're worried about intimidate and it gets consumed, well then you have access to acrobatics, which would double from 55 power to 110 power, and this would allow you to hit opposing fighting types or flip a mirror matchup against another Corydon relatively nicely, and then that way you could even pop the Terra flying on this thing to gain stab, and then if you're worried about earthquakes or precipice blades, you could go for that Terra flying boosted acrobatics, so that is another option. You do have access to Iron Head, which will help you deal with fairy types, because fairy is going to be 4 times super effective to Corydon, so overall you do have some really good options at your disposal. And plus, you could also run Crunch if you wanted to deal with psychic types that way. Now, as far as Miraidon goes, Miraidon is really going to flip the dynamic, because so far in the current metas from Regulation A all the way to F, as far as the future Paradox Pokemon go, a lot of them have had to rely on the booster energy to activate their Quark Drive, because their only option of having Electric Terrain get set up outside of manual setter is Pinkerton. And Pinkerton is not that great. That thing's just in the corner making sad sea urchin noises. But now with Miraidon, you have its Hadron Engine ability, which will summon the Electric Terrain when it switches in, and similar to Corydon's Orichalcum Pulse, Miraidon's Hadron Engine is also going to give it a 33% boost to its special attack, and Terra Electric Electrodrift just deletes things, so Miraidon is going to be incredibly scary, because not only do you have a stab move getting powered up by the terrain and Terra, you also have that Hadron Engine also powering up the special attack stat to begin with. You could run Electro Drift here, which is Miraidon's counterpart to Corydon's Collision Force, which is a base 100 special electric type attack that gets that 33% boost on super effective hits. You can run Draco Meteor, and while that would lower your special attack 2 stages, you can easily switch Miraidon out or run a White Herb on it if you wanted to, or alternatively you could run Dragon Pulse, so you don't have to worry about the Dragon Pulse. So you could use that, and then you don't have to worry about the special attack stage getting lower 2 stages. You could also run Calm Mind on this thing to increase its special attack and special defense, a +1 into that base 135 special attack stat paired with its base 135 speed stat. It means this thing will be insanely scary incredibly quickly. And you also have access to some HP recovery with Parabolic Charge if you wanted to run that. And if you want to run this thing on, say, maybe a choice scarf set or a choice spec set, you could also run U-turn, because Corydon doesn't, it's not the only thing to have fun with the pivoting shenanigans. You can also do that with Miraidon. So you do have the access to the U-turn right there, which means Miraidon could be a really good countermeasure to Kyogre, since you do have that electric type stab right there. If you want to deal with the plethora of dragons, you have Draco Meteor or Dragon Pulse. A choice specs or a life orb will be very handy on this thing. And if you don't want to run the choice item, you could still go the Combined route. Really all you need is the Electro Drift and the boosted Dragon Pulse, and you should be able to just send things off into next Tuesday. And then finally, let's talk about Terapagos. Terapagos being a normal type, it's our first normal type restricted Pokemon, and it's got a plethora of tools in its kit. In its base Terrestrial form, its ability is Terra Shell. If it's got its HP completely full, it's going to make sure the first attack that hits it is going to be resistant unless it's otherwise immune to it. So you don't have to worry about ghost types ruining this, because the normal typing will naturally protect it from that. But if you were to take a fighting type attack while Terapagos is in this form, the attack is going to be considered resisted. So Terapagos will be able to calmly set up with a Calm Mind if it wanted to, get a +1 into its attack and get a +1 to its special attack and its special defense. And Terra Starstorm, its signature move, is really strong because it's a base 120 power move, and when you terrestrialize and go into the stellar form with Terapagos, this becomes a spread move, and it just absolutely ruins Fing's days. So you have that Terra Starstorm right there, and when you do switch into your Terapagos stellar form, your ability changes to Terraform 0, and so when you terrestrialize, this will remove the effect of weather and terrain once. So it's a good way of clearing the board and disrupting your opponent's setup. If they have a Rillaboom on the field, no more priority Grassy Glides. If they have Miraidon on the field, no more electric boosted electric terrain. If they have Groudon or Koraidon on the field, the sky just got a little bit darker. So that is a relatively nice ability to have in its kit. And unlike any other Pokemon, when Terapagos terrestrializes, its stats actually go up. So its HP jumps from 95 to 160, and then its special attack jumps from 105 to 130. So if you start setting up with Calm Minds and then going for Terra Starstorm, this thing is just going to absolutely rain on your opponent's parades. So that will be something to keep in mind with Terapagos as an option to pick from for your team. Alright, so we went through the list of the restricted Pokemon, and just before we end the video, I wanted to talk about a few things that might be good to keep in your back pocket for when you're team building to try to get around these. Now, there's no such thing as a perfect counter to everything, but at least so long as you have some rough ideas for what to put on your team, you can get around the majority of these restricted Pokemon. So one of the first things I want to bring up is Intimidate plus Knockoff together. So the option here is you can run Incineroar, Crocodile, or Scrafty, or Arbok, I guess, but these 4 Pokemon get access to both Intimidate and Knockoff, and this is going to be relatively nice because there are a lot of physical attackers amongst the restricted Pokemon, like Groudon and Koraidon are perfect examples. Regam Black and Zan Crown are also really solid options to keep in mind. The Intimidate support is going to be very handy, and don't even get me started on Calyrex Ice Rider. But so what you could do is you could run the Knockoff, and then that way if you do run into something with the Clear Amulet on the ladder, you do at least have the option of removing the Clear Amulet with Knockoff. In Incineroar's case, you could have made the case or the argument for not running Knockoff in order to run, say, maybe Helping Hand, but going into Regulation G, it's going to be nice to have that combination of Knockoff and Intimidate, and then that way you can always recycle your Intimidate setter. The nice thing here too is both Incineroar and Scrafty are relatively bulky at the end of the day. Crocodile is a little bit glassy, but it does have speed working in its favor as opposed to the other two. But if you have Tailwind or Trick Room up, and then you say you use the Knockoff to remove that Clear Amulet, and your Intimidator is around, you can switch them out, and then you can go back into them and then recycle your Intimidate and get that attack drop into the target. And in Incineroar's case, if the opponent has the Clear Amulet on, it completely denies Parting Shot, not only just preventing the stat reduction, but it also prevents the switch function as well. So you have to get rid of that Clear Amulet one way or the other, especially if it's a Pokemon that is setting up with, say, Swords Dance or Dragon Dance. And that leads us to another move to keep in mind, and that is going to be Haze. So Haze is going to be very strong since it removes the stat changes for the entire field, whether it be attack boosts or attack drops, special attack, speed, the whole 9 yards, all of it's going to be removed. You could run it on, say, Calyrex Shadow Rider if you really wanted to. Calyrex only really needs the 2 offensive moves. You could make the case for Haze as its 3rd move next to Protect, so you could do that. You could also do it for Zekrom, as I mentioned earlier. Primarina gets access to it. Clodsire gets access to it. Murkrow gets access to it too, which that could be extremely nice since it does have the Prankster Tailwind as well at its disposal. So you could run, say, Haze to just remove the stat boosts. You could have the Tailwind, and then you could run another status move to take advantage of Prankster with Murkrow. You could even run Defog, and then that way you could clear out the terrain as well. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Murkrow is the perfect counter, but anyways, you could do that with Murkrow. Blastoise and Empoleon both get Haze as well, so does Overqwil and Gengar. Gengar is relatively fast still with the base 110 speed, so you could do that. Defog is another good option to keep in mind. So basically, Defog will remove the terrain as well as any entry hazards that are on the field. Giratina gets access to it, Corviknight does, Scizor, Galarian Weezing, they all get it. Weirdly enough, Conkeldurr gets it, which I didn't even know that was a thing, but apparently Conkeldurr can just blow everything away. I guess it just takes a deep breath and just blows everything out, but yeah, anyways, Conkeldurr can do that as well. And then some other specific Pokemon that you could use too, and this could help get around the Clear Amulet a little bit, is actually the Treasures of Ruin. You could use Ting Lu if you wanted to with its Vessel of Ruin to lower the special attack of everything on the field. This could help deal with the amount of special attacking restricted Pokemon, or if you wanted to, you could make the case for Wo-Chien with its Tablets of Ruin, and then that way you're lowering the physical attack of everything on the field. So Wo-Chien and Ting Lu could be relatively nice, while Chen Pao's Sword of Ruin would be great for lowering the defense of everything, and this could even be nice paired next to Koridon or Groudon, since both of them are such heavy hitting physical attackers that the defense drop from Sword of Ruin will just make their stab moves go an extra mile. So you do have that option, or if you really wanted to, especially if you wanted to play around with your Terra option, you could run Chi-Yu next to, say, the likes of Dialga, Kyogre, Palkia, Kyurem White. Kyurem White especially would be scary next to a Chi-Yu, especially if you ran a Specs Blizzard set and you already had the snow on the field. That would be wild right there, having the Beads of Ruin just drop everything's special defense. So the Treasures of Ruin overall would be relatively strong next to a lot of these restricted format Pokemon, especially as we've seen without the restricted formats, their prominence in the formats prior to this. And then some other Pokemon you might want to consider too is the Violet Paradox Bonds, with the option of the fact that you don't need to run the booster energy. You can run some other items and then pair them next to Miraidon. So that could be really nice. We might see a resurgence of Iron Hands now that it'll have access to its Quark Drive, in addition to having its Assault Vest being held. On top of that, Iron Bundle can run a Focus Sash instead of having to run the booster energy, and now Bundle's going to be a little bit harder to get off the field, and even Iron Treads getting a speed boost could be relatively nice for going for quick Iron Heads or Body Presses. You could speed up the Iron Treads, go for maybe an Iron Defense, then go for a Body Press, stuff like that. And then obviously these Scarlet Paradox Bonds are going to really love being next to Koridon or Groudon. We might even see Slitherwayne actually do something with an attack boosted Photosynthesis next to Koridon or Groudon going for first impression. So that could be wild. But anyways, that's my main thoughts on Regulation G. We'll talk more in depth about the individual restricted mods in their own discussion videos. We're also still going to do some battle videos for the remainder of Regulation F for the month of April. So be sure to come back to the channel and see that. Also, let me know what you think in the comments down below. See you later.